It's been 3 years since medicinal cannabis was able to be offered legally to people in this country living with chronic pain. So what sort of a difference has it made to Queenslanders? Kevin James was the first official medicinal cannabis patient through the doors of a cannabis clinic when it opened here in Brisbane. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning, Rebecca, and thank you for the opportunity.
What sort of treatment do you get at a cannabis clinic?
Well, my experience was initially an online interview, and then I met face-to-face and went into the Cannabis Access Clinic at Belmont in Brisbane when it first opened up. And they need a referral from your GP or specialist, and they go through a process of offering you an appropriate medicinal cannabis oil. Initially, they were imported from Canada. It's an unregulated medicine in Australia, and we now have our own product in Australia from a company called LGP.
Why are you taking cannabis oil?
I have a degenerative condition of the lower spine, which I've had for 10 years. And in layman's terms, I get nerve pain, and I also have osteoarthritis, which affects my ability to walk, to drive, and to do many activities of living. And the medicinal cannabis oil is an option for me to help complement my other treatment.
How much pain were you in, and how limiting was that for you in terms of living a contented life?
It's very difficult when you have chronic pain because it's an invisible illness, and it does cause a lot of isolation. And I belong to a pain support group who've been very helpful, and you get very familiar with the four walls in your own house. So in 2012, 13 and 14, I had some back procedures which were unsuccessful, so I had to live with the mobility I have left. So I decided to get out and about and connect with people and join community groups, pain support groups, volunteer work, Toastmasters. I try and keep active because you have to be connected with society, but it's very difficult when you're fighting a chronic illness because people can't see it.
Kevin James, the first official medicinal cannabis patient through the doors of a Brisbane cannabis clinic when it opened. What format do you take the cannabis oil?
Well, the cannabis oil is just that. It's a combination of products. One is called CBD, the other is the psychoactive component called THC, which is very good for pain relief, and it's an oil that I take under the tongue. I take a mil in the morning, a mil in the evening. Your doctor will discuss your protocols, but generally speaking with medicinal cannabis oil, you have to go slow and start very low. You move upwards in the progression. And it's not an overnight magic bullet, but it does eventually work, and it has worked very well for me with my chronic pain.
Okay, yeah, I want to get to the difference that it's made in your life because you have been taking cannabis oil since October last year. So you put it under a drop under your tongue. What does it taste like?
Well, it's not a very pleasant flavour, but it actually works, and I really don't mind what it tastes like, provided that it does the job that it's supposed to do.
And what is that effect? What effect has it had on you?
Well, it's a gradual feeling of well-being. Medical cannabis, as I said, it doesn't work overnight. It gradually leads you to a state where you feel much better because it allows your body to heal itself. So for me, it's allowed me to walk more, to get out more, to contribute more. It helps my mental ability as well as my physical ability. So it's not just talking about getting the body better, it also helps the mind cure itself, because people who have chronic pain suffer a lot from depression, and it's hard to get out because you have to pace yourself, and every single activity you do has to be planned well ahead.
Kevin, that sounds like it's been life-changing, really.
Yes, it's been a huge change in my life. I get out now for a couple of hours every day, whereas beforehand you tend to get a little bit stuck in a rut and you can't get out and do the things you would like to do. It's not a cure, it doesn't get you back to 100%, but I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and it's really helped me a great deal.
Were you open to the idea of having cannabis oil as a form of treatment? Because, as you well know, for some in society, there's still a real stigma attached to that.
Yes, there is a stigma, and I'm not quite sure why that is, because I suppose we have two debates going on here between recreational cannabis and medical cannabis. And there are some that say all recreational cannabis is treating an illness. However, I've pursued the legal option because it's really helping me, and there are three big barriers at the moment with price, education of doctors, and accessibility. It's over-regulated and very difficult as you've got to go through two levels of government.
Yeah, how expensive has it been for you to receive cannabis oil as a treatment?
For me personally, and suffering from chronic pain, it's actually at the lower spectrum of the cost, but it is still quite expensive, and supply and demand will dictate what happens in the future. But for me, it's about $230 a month. However, I am aware that people who have epilepsy, who are using a different product, they may pay up to $40,000 or more a year. So there's a wide range of pricing from chronic pain all the way through to many other conditions that can be helped, such as epilepsy, as I've mentioned.
Yeah, which that figure for a lot of people would be prohibitive, and especially if you're in a situation where chronic pain means you can't work full time.
That's exactly right. I had to medically retire about 4 years ago, and I had scaled down to part-time work at the time, and this has given me hope. Medical cannabis has given me hope that I may be able to get some part-time work in the future because I'm more energetic, active, and the mind is working, and I've been able to wean myself off 50% of the pharmaceutical opiates I'm on, which also helps because they have their own terrible side effects.
Yeah, well, that is huge, isn't it? The opiate side, the flip side of this equation is if you can diminish that medicine in your life. Have you noticed any other side effects to taking cannabis oil?
Well, I mentioned initially that you've got to start slow, go very low with the medication and use the protocols that your cannabis doctor gives you. You will gradually build up to a dose that's tolerable where your body starts to respond very well. And the only side effect I had, and this will be different for everybody, was a little bit of balance. But that's an underlying condition I have anyway. So often your body goes through this phase of healing itself and you may feel a little bit worse initially, but I guarantee you the benefits, speaking personally for me, have been enormous.
Does your body become resistant to it, Kevin? You were the first official medicinal cannabis patient here in Brisbane. That was October last year. What are we now? End of July. Are you building up a tolerance? Are you becoming resistant to it?
Well, I have read different things about how some people may become tolerant to it, but when it's a natural product, my understanding is no, if you use the natural herb. Some of the pharmaceutical products I've read about that have been engineered from cannabis, which I disagree with, you may develop tolerance. And I've read in the UK where they're trialling something for epilepsy, it's synthetic, and they've developed a tolerance. But I believe in the natural, full-strength product, as best it can be, to be released to the public.
Did you have to go through a rigorous traditional medicine, I say that in inverted commas, sort of procedure in order to be able to access cannabis oil?
Yes, it's quite difficult, and my best resource was my GP, who's very supportive, and it's a very difficult process, hence the expense involved in the initial application, because it takes a doctor who's not experienced in this 1 or 2 hours to fill out the paperwork with the Department of Health and the TGA, or Therapeutic Goods Administration. It's over-regulated, it's very difficult, and the paperwork does defeat many people.
You also mentioned training for doctors. Is that something the doctors expressed to you, or is it a sentiment more broadly felt in the community of people who take cannabis oil?
I think it's a broader movement that's gaining acceptance, and I believe there are courses or opportunities for doctors now training to learn about the endocannabinoid system. We actually have receptors in the body that accept cannabis, and we make our own, what's called in-house or endogenous cannabis, and doctors need to learn this and are being trained in this. And in America, Canada and other countries, it's mainstream and well accepted. Australia's a little bit behind in the education sphere.
Do you, looking ahead now, given the improvements that you've seen in terms of your mobility and your general well-being, your mental health as well, do you think you'll be taking cannabis oil for the rest of your life, Kevin?
Well, the short answer to that is yes, because I believe it helps your body heal itself. And while it may not work for everybody, I believe for chronic pain, it's a very real alternative to taking these dangerous pharmaceutical drugs, and that's why I've been fortunate to scale off 50% of my dose, which I'd been on for a couple of years. we need it as part of an overall pain management strategy, but it needs to be, in my opinion, a first-line option, not something that you have exhausted all other options before you can actually get access to it.
Kevin, I really appreciate you sharing your experience with us this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.